Today we're going to be talking about your personal circle of power, or what factors you should be focusing on in relationship to your health and goals that you actually have control over versus those that you don't and are thus just wasting your time and energy. Hey everyone, Dr. Ashley here. I have so many patients that come in to work with me on specific health goals and outcomes that get stuck in a state of confusion and frustration because they are trying to have control over and influence factors that are completely outside of their control. Thus, they're convincing themselves that what they're trying to do is impossible, instead of focusing on what they actually have control over in order to make their dreams a reality. So today I wanted to lay out my personal take on your circle of power, or these circles with which you have influence over, and thus what you should be focusing on when you're taking steps to achieve anything. It doesn't have to be just a health goal, but any goals that you have in your life, what you actually want to focus on. So stick around to learn all about that. So here is a graphic of what I'm calling Dr. Ashley's circle of power. And this concept is that there are three levels or three circles that we have varying levels of control over in our lives. So if you look at the graphic, the outermost circle is the largest, and it is made up of everything that possibly has influences on us that is outside of our control, that we have no control over. And then there is a second smaller circle, and that is all of the factors in our lives that we possibly have some influence over. We don't have complete control over these things, but there is we do have some sort of sway or influence with them. And then finally, the smallest circle in the middle is made up of things that we have control over. It is interesting to note that that is the smallest circle, but that's okay. That's really all that you need in order to make your life and your health exactly what you want it to. So let me go in to explain some of the different factors that go within each one of these circles. So let's start with the circle of things that are out of our control. One of my good friends once told me a quote, and I don't know who originally said it, but it's that you'll never be enlightened if you can't accept the weather and traffic. So those are two things that absolutely go in this outside, not under your control ring. And you can make all the arguments that you want about how maybe we do have some influence over the number of cars on the road and ultimately the way our planet's climate is going. But on a day-to-day basis, you can't control whether it's going to rain or not. You can't control if it's going to be a day that a lot of people take off and the traffic is better. So those are just two things that at this point you should probably just accept. Another factor that goes in this outer ring is going to be the vast majority of other humans on this planet. We cannot control other adults. That just period, that is not the way it works. We can try to control them, and it usually drives both us and them crazy. So the actions, the responses, anything that other adult humans do largely falls within this outside ring. Another thing that falls within this outside ring is the presence of substances that you may want to stay away from. So that might be alcohol, that might be cigarettes, that might be drugs, that might be food. We cannot 100% control our environment when it comes to these things. We may be able to control our individual homes, but unless you want to stay stuck in your house and be a recluse, if you want to go out and socialize and interact with other people, we cannot control the presence of these factors. And then finally, another one that I really wanted to highlight here, being in this most outer ring, is going to be your actions from the past. That is done. It is over. There is nothing we can do to change it. We can change our current thoughts about those actions, but what actually took place, the actual actions that we took, we have no control over. So next, let's move to the middle circle, or those factors that we have some influence over. Other people that you have close relationships to fall under this category. This would be things like your close friends, your family that you interact with regularly, your spouse or significant other, your coworkers, your employees, your supervisors, and your children would also fall under this category. As much as I would love to say we have complete control over our children, that's not the case. You just have a strong influence, but you can restrict them and give them specific boundaries. Let's highlight that, especially when we're talking about coworkers or spouses. Again, we can't control exactly how they're going to respond, but we can influence them and work with them in a way that benefits us both. And we're going to talk about some strategies or the kind of overarching way to approach those factors here in a little bit. Other things that we have influence over are going to be things like our emotions and our thoughts. There will be times when random thoughts occur about situations, and we will have emotions about those thoughts and those situations that come up, and we can't intervene ahead of time. Our brain just doesn't work that fast before we're starting to experience those emotions. And that's okay. But we can have influence over those. With time and practice, you can train your brain and your body to respond to situations in different ways. And so that's why I put this one in the circle of influence. We're not going to have complete control, but we can work towards developing a more positive outlook on life versus a pessimistic outlook on life. We can work on lowering our reactivity so that we can respond in a better way, more automatically and subconsciously. That is a talk for a different video, so I'm not going to get into details of that, but just know where a lot of those kind of emotions and thoughts and automatic reactions lie in this circle of influence. Another thing that we have strong influence over, but not control over, is going to be our actions in the future. And I really want you to think about that. Because we are living in the present moment, we cannot force our future self to do anything. We can set ourselves up for either success or failure, but we can't actually control the action we are going to take in the future. It's not worth it to think about and wish you could change things that have happened in the past because they're done. It is just the way it is. And we can't force ourselves to do everything that we want in the future. And so that's where our circle of control, this innermost circle, comes into play. And I was thinking about it a lot, and I was trying to distill it down to what are the factors that we truly have 100% control over. And in my opinion, I think what we have 100% control over is our actions in the present moment. That is the one thing that I could think of that goes within this circle of control. It's simple, but it's such an important lesson to understand because it gives you so much freedom. And what I mean by that is that what you can do is let go of everything in the outer circle. You can focus on the inner circle, your actual center of control, to have influence on that middle circle. So let's talk about how a lot of us don't use this concept to our advantage and actually let it take advantage of us. So the first thing that I see a lot of my patients, and myself included, show up with is giving away the responsibility to the outer circles, especially to the outermost circle of things that we don't have control over. And when you give away that responsibility, that takes all of your power. In addition to giving the responsibility and power away to things that are not in your control, the other thing that I see us, myself included, do is not take responsibility for what is in our control. So our actions, again, are 100% in our control. That means our inaction, our actions, and our reactions. What we actually do is within our control. And we have to take responsibility of that and how those actions give us the results we see in our health, in our relationships, in our life. So let me give you a really just plain black and white example. If you will only exercise when it's 75 degrees and sunny outside, you could easily blame the weather for your inability to get in shape. And I know that may be a crazy and extreme example, but it kind of gives you this idea of this concept of not allowing things that you don't have control over take away your ability to get what you want done in life. I'll give you some more kind of health related examples where I see this come up a lot to get into more of those nuances and make it a little bit more clear. The first one that likely comes up a lot is weight loss. Patients repeatedly think that their success lies within this third circle. They need other people to get on board. They need work to get on board. They need their spouse to get on board. They need society to get on board with their weight loss efforts. And when these factors that they have no control over don't fall in line with setting them up for success, they're very disappointed when they're not getting the results that they want. So they do what they can to try to control these outside factors. So they remove food, trigger food for them from their house. And they force their spouse and their significant others or whoever's living with them to go on the same diet that they are. And then when real life starts to hit, where those other people who they may have influence over but not complete control over go off the diet, or they go out into the real world and all of a sudden all of these trigger foods are present, they're disappointed because they gave all of that responsibility and power to these external things, and they continued to behave the same way they were going to. And instead of taking full responsibility for their actual action of what they put in their mouths, they blame their failure on these external factors. But where they should have been focusing on was their circle of power, their circle of control, which was their action. No person can force you to eat anything. Food is an inanimate object. It cannot force you to eat it, okay? And I know these seem crazy because in our brains, it feels like these factors have so much control, but they don't. And you really just need to start exercising your ultimate power, your ultimate control, and taking the actions that you want to get your results in life. Next, let's talk about relationships. Something that I had heard before or read in a book somewhere was that when your partner is either doing something that you don't like or not doing something that you want them to do, you have three possible responses. One is to accept the behavior and just keep living your life. Two is to leave. And three is to change your reaction and your behavior. So change yourself. And also, something that kind of goes along those lines that I've heard and I think is very helpful in this setting is that it just takes one person to change a relationship. And I believe that was from Brooke Castillo over at the Life Coach School. And I think these are so wonderful because it does point out, it goes back to you have control over your actions. You have control over how you are responding to and thinking about that other person and how you are actually behaving around them. Again, I'm putting these significant others in our circle of influence because I think that's so true, is you can choose to behave a different way towards your significant other, and that may in turn change their behavior. It's not guaranteed, but you might be able to influence them. A good way to think about this is imagine a couple who's fighting and one partner is so frustrated because they want their partner to express love to them in whatever way, through their behavior, through their words, whatever action they want them to take. And then you ask, okay, well, what are you doing to show your love? And they're like, nothing. I'm waiting for him to show me love first, and then I will start to express love from them. And that just shows how you are giving that power away to something that's completely outside of your control. And instead of saying, okay, I do want love in our relationship, so let me start acting out of love, let my behavior reflect love, with the possibility that your partner might see that. And then if they were thinking the same thing, I'm just waiting for her to show me love first, and then I will start to express love. And then both of you start to express love. It's a win-win instead of this like stalemate of like, who's going to express love first. And I think this can be translated into any close relationship. You know, you want your kids to behave a certain way. Maybe you need to be, how can you show up differently in the relationship? You have a best friend that you're quarreling with. How can you show up and behave differently to possibly influence them? Again, we're not controlling them. We're not coercing them. We're not trying to manipulate them. That is not the goal with this influence piece. It is showing up in the way that you want to show up, with the hope that maybe their behavior might turn to something that you want in turn. And maybe that showing up or that behavior change for you is voicing what you specifically want from them. It may not mean that they will do it, but it might mean that they will. And you don't know. Instead of just secretly being like, why won't my husband buy me flowers? I just want him to buy me stupid flowers so that I felt loved. What if he has no idea? And instead you say, okay, well, my options are I can live with it and just say, you know, I don't need flowers. I could buy myself flowers if I really wanted to experience that expression of love, and I can give that to myself, or I could tell him and see what his thoughts are about it. So really don't try to control other people. It's not going to work. It's not going to make the relationship better. Focus on what you do have control over, and that is you, my friend. Okay, and then one final quick example, it would be exercise. So all of the things that you can't control the weather, you can't control the gym's policies and practices, you can't control the gym's pricing, you can't control how busy it is at the gym. You have some influence over the way you might be feeling towards exercise, and you could practice trying to think thoughts that produce feelings that make you more motivated, more determined, more excited. But what you do have control over is actually doing the exercise. 100% control over that. It's a yes or no. Did you exercise? And maybe something happens where you started out on a run and then it started pouring, but at least you got part of it done, and then you could go home and switch and do some stretching or something like that. You getting out of bed in the morning to go exercise is completely under your control. All right, so what are the steps for you to actually take to put this circle of power into place in your life and actually start getting the results that you want? So first step is identifying which category these factors go in, which things are out of your control, which are under your influence, and which are completely under your control. And really starting to look at whatever goal it is and all of the factors that could possibly have influence over it and putting them into those categories. Next, you want to look at all of the factors that you placed into that third circle. So things that are not under your control. What you want to do with these factors is surrender to them. Accept them the way they are. You're not going to change them. Stop giving your power and that responsibility to them because it's not worth your time or your energy. Then look at all of the factors that are in the second ring or things that are under your influence. What you want to do with these factors is see how you can work synergetically with them so that you get the outcome that you want. So you want to work with them, go with the flow, try to get the best outcome for all factors, all parties involved, but understand that you're not going to have control over them completely, and that's okay. And then remember that what you have absolute control over is your actions, and you want to find your strength from this. So fall back on this power, fall back on this strength, fall back on this control, and understand that what you actually do day to day and in the moment comes down to you. I see this as a very peaceful way of looking at things because there's automatically, like at least half the factors, you can just take off your plate because they're going to be outside of your circle of control. So it doesn't even matter. You don't even have to think about them or worry about them. So that's automatically lightening the load of any potential barriers or stressors, is just not even worrying about those things. And then remember what I said about your actions. The only thing you have control over is your present moment actions, what you are doing right now. You have some influence over the things, your actions in the future. You can set yourself up for success by being very intentional in the moment. You have no control over what happened in the past. So that burger and milkshakes that you had yesterday, that's outside of your circle of control. Forget about it and focus on what you can do right now. That is making it so much easier. Instead of having to think from your future self about all of the million things that you have to get done to reach your goal, all you have to worry about is right now, this present moment. What's the one thing you should be doing right now? And you don't even have to think about anything that happened in the past. It's just most of it in the present, setting yourself up for success in the future. The past is the past, doesn't matter. Okay, so I hope this was helpful for you. I think this is a really great way for me to tackle any new project or any challenge that I'm working through or working on, is to really get down to what do I have control and influence over, and how can I leverage my present moment self to set myself up for success. So remember to surrender to the things that are outside your control, work synergistically with the things that are under your influence, and find your strength from the things that are completely within your control. And I thought it would be good to end with the serenity prayer here. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. If you want to learn more about your circle of control and the actions you can take in the present moment when it comes to your health, and especially when it comes to your weight loss, head on over to selfhealingdrashley.com to learn more.